welcome back. Welcome back on the show. Thanks for joining me, bro.
Thanks for having me back, bro.
Dude, only makes sense to do it here. This is literally, I mean, not the same location, but same resort area, like same mastermind spot.
Right outside that window, you can see the Airbnb I was renting on our first one. So that's...
Yeah. We were smart enough this time to do it before the mastermind started.
Oh my gosh, I was so tired. I'm still tired. My son right now has been a little bit under the weather, and so I've not slept more than a 90-minute block in 3 or 4 days, but not quite as tired as last time.
Well, we'll still squeeze a bunch of juice out for this interview. But dude, for people that maybe didn't listen to the first interview, somehow don't know who you are, give them the spark notes. Who you are, where you coming from, what are you doing now?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Cole Hatter. I originally was a firefighter, and God put it on my heart to want to help people. So I was like, cool, what's a career that I can do where I can get paid to help others? And playing with fire and saving lives sounded like a good idea. So that was what I did. I started at 19, and at 21 years old, I got into a car accident. So just 18 months into what I thought would be a lifelong career, I was ejected out of a car going 80 miles an hour and ended up in a wheelchair and had to learn how to walk again. And it took about a full year of physical recovery before I was up and walking around and back in my life again. I actually even had to move back in with my mom and dad at 21 because I was so banged up right after the accident I couldn't even care for myself. And so that put me in a place of needing to pick a new career, obviously. You can't be a firefighter from a wheelchair. And immediately following the accident, we didn't know how well I would recover. And for those that don't know me, I've had 100% recovery. I feel great. My legs work and everything's fine. But in that year of rehab and recovery, I started looking elsewhere, and that's where I found entrepreneurship. I picked real estate investing as my vehicle, which I still do to this day, 17 years later. 17 days, I've been crushing it, bro. 17 years later. And so the reason I picked real estate was it's the one common denominator I saw amongst wealthy people. Mm-hmm. There were wealthy real estate investors that's all they did, but then there were like wealthy doctors that would buy buildings, and there would be like wealthy, accountants that would buy strip centers. And I was like, man, it doesn't matter really what the career is. What rich people do is freaking real estate. So I was like, all right, I'll do real estate. And that was as deep as I thought about it and as much time as I spent. And so from my wheelchair, from my mom and dad's house, I built my real estate business. Like I said, 17 years ago, it's done tens of millions of dollars since. Mm-hmm. And on this 17-year journey of being an entrepreneur, I've started probably about 50 businesses, and 45 of them have failed, and probably a dozen have failed magnificently. Yeah. But the 4 or 5 that I've gotten right have paid me handsomely, and I'm way up. And so now I run a series of different businesses, some that are subsidiaries to others, and some that are standalone, completely doing their own thing. What I'm most passionate about is my family. Just had a son 4 months ago, so we have a 10-year-old and an infant. I just figured I'd start the whole clock over again. Who needs freedom? And so right now, being with my family is a huge priority for me, and I'm able to do that. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship. That's why in the startup days and in the early days, we're willing to work 100-hour weeks. So that we can get to a point where when our children are young, should we choose to, and hopefully everyone chooses to if they have, if they're parenting children, but if we choose to, we can be more of a stay-at-home dad. So one of the beauties of COVID for me was got rid of the office, started working from home exclusively, and I don't think I'll ever leave my house again. And it's just awesome eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my family 7 days a week and doing that. So that's who I am. I'm a family man that runs a couple of businesses to support my life.
Dude, I love it. And the last part in particular, we're going to dive into, because that's something that I'm probably most excited about, most passionate about with respect to business. And I think you're a good example of it. I want to talk about some of the pivots that you've made in your journey. Now, sure. If people didn't listen to episode, I think it was like 5. It was really early on. I think the show actually launched right as I was boarding my flight to come here that time, because it takes that weird window where Apple won't tell you.
Sure, the RSS feed or whatever it is.
Yeah, it literally, as I was walking into JFK or LaGuardia or whatever the hell it was, it went live. So you were episode 5. We talked about some of the pivots you did within the real estate space in 2008 and that whole debacle and how you kind of came out of that. Specifically, in the last couple of years, you've made some really cool pivots in your business. You've created a bunch of new really cool partnerships. Talk to me about what the last couple of years have looked like in business, and then maybe we can start to dissect your views on partnerships and stuff like that.
Sure. I've leaned way heavier into investing into passive assets. So it became my business to find where to park my money. And then as I started running out of money, because you can only write checks for so long, I got pretty good at raising money. And so I had lenders and investors that would support my real estate investment business, but I was just a fix and flipper. I'd buy, fix and flip a house. So I'd borrow, $1 million from you. I live in Orange County, California. So, the average house I think is like 800 and some odd thousand bucks. So I was buying $1 million homes, which sounds like a lot of money, but in Orange County, that's your starter home right now. It's crazy. And so buy $1 million home, put a few $100,000 into it, and sell it for 1.5, 1.6, 1.8, make a few $100,000 myself, pay my lenders back, and that was the end of it. It was transactional. Now I'm building a fund where I've got investors that are parking their money with me for 5 years, 10 years, indefinitely years. In some cases, they know that, and I say this with humility, that I can manage their money better than they can. And that I'm not some licensed, stockbroker, but as far as putting their money to work in my real estate portfolio gives them better returns with less effort and less stress than most of what the world offers. And so one pivot that I've made is I've been investing like crazy into all sorts of things. In the last 3 years, we've invested in 23 restaurants. That was new. Fast casual restaurants. Invested in a CBD farm. Invested in all kinds of things. A lot of it my own money, but a lot of it other people's money as well. And just collecting that passive income. One thing I've learned in my 30s is I was blessed to make a lot of millions of dollars, but I made each one of them one time, and I had to keep making them. Mm-hmm. Like I would have a record-breaking year, and that's exciting, but the next year would start back at scratch. Now, of course, I have my rental properties from real estate, but all of my businesses were all what I call active income. They weren't passive income. Yeah. And again, praise God that they were paying me millions of dollars a year, but I had to work my ass off to earn them. And so now what I want to do is I want to take those dollars, park them into investments, and eventually get my career to a point where I have enough passive income coming in that now my job is to just manage my portfolio and find more assets to put into it. The big boys and girls club, right? Mm-hmm. And so as I leave my 30s and get into my 40s, I have a clear path of being in a position of having 7 figures of passive income by my 45th birthday. That's not pie in the sky stuff. That's just if I stay at the pace I'm at with the relationships I've got and the assets I'm looking at, I'll be able to make 7 figures a year without having to work and just manage that portfolio. And at that point, I'll probably just be full-time dad and then go plant a church or something. I don't even know what. One thing that we'll talk about too, because we can still talk more about my pivot, but one thing that I think I have an unpopular opinion on is rest. There's a lot of hustle culture. You're a part of it. I'm a part of it. I grind my face off. You know that this weekend I'm about to work 100 hours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? Well, I guess there's not even 100 hours in. That would be 72 hours. But I'm going to work.
You'll find out how to do it.
Yeah, I'll figure out how to work. I'll work 100 hours in 72. But the point is, I've got no problem with hard work. But this narrative that you need to always work and never rest and never have your family and never take a break and never travel, and it's crazy that this hustle culture has, I think, caused a lot of harm for a lot of marriages and a lot of families. But so part of my pivot is to just have total freedom, bro. I am very clear on why I started my first business. I wanted to be a fully present father, a fully present husband. My parents just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. So I'm one of the rare people that still has parents that are passionately married. Big Sexy and Martini.
Are they going to be here this weekend?
They will be here. Yeah, they'll be here tomorrow. You'll see them. And dude, they're 73 and 70 years old, and they can't keep their hands off of each other. And and I tell my dad, like, you can't smack mom's butt anymore. Now it's elder abuse, right? But still, I've had a really good example of a really solid familyhood. I don't have those tragic stories that so many people do that I'm so empathetic towards. I had the solid family upbringing, and so that matters to me. And I want to duplicate that. One of the greatest gifts my parents gave me was a healthy marriage that they had. Yeah. And so all the moves I'm making right now are to be unapologetically wealthy with complete time freedom. I don't want to build a business of 500 employees and be on the Inc. 500 and go speak at business summits about company culture once you get past your 700th hire and all that stuff. That's exciting. We have a lot of mutual friends like Danny, who has 800 some odd employees who will be waiting for us as soon as this podcast ends to hang out. And I love that type of entrepreneur, but that's not for me. Yeah. It's great. You create jobs, right? You're creating a lot of economic stimulus. We've gone way off topic now, but I'm gonna just keep going. You create a lot of economic stimulus. Like, I get the beauty of big business, but I know for sure that's not for me. Mm-hmm. I wanna have 10 people on my team. I wanna have millions of dollars a year coming in passively, and I wanna just manage that money and then be looking for the next big deal. And that's the pivot that I'm in the middle of doing now. Mm-hmm. And so shutting down businesses that didn't serve me anymore, and even businesses that I passionately loved, like Thrive, that I knew I couldn't continue to run with the effort that this pivot required for me, I was willing to walk away from millions of dollars. Thrive was a multi-seven-figure business by itself, and as you know, this is the final Thrive weekend. Yeah. And that hurts. I this is my blood, sweat, and tear, but I know that Thrive as a business model will require me to work it for the rest of my life. Whereas if I park it temporarily and focus on my pivot, back to the point, and build up that passive income, that then I can choose to do Thrive again in the future if I want, but it will be a complete passion project. I won't even care about the money anymore.
Yeah. Talk to me about that, because obviously I'm curious about the decision making to lead into some of those pivots, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm really curious about that, because obviously like we basically lobbied you to continue Connect the last two times we've renewed. Yeah. And we kind of bully you while you're on stage and put you on the spot.
Yeah.
But even like Connect is even like a small part of the Big Thrive brand, right? Like Big Thrive, you have thousands of people every single year. Uh-huh. And I don't think people realize that, like, usually people think it's like a sales pitch, like run to the back of the room, like we only interview people. Like, I don't think people actually understand that your DMs are full all year asking when it opens.
Right.
Like, I guess all of that is to say that a lot of people are like passionate about your brand, which people have seen on your Instagram stories the last, 12 hours while you're doing the Q&A.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the decision and what that was like, because obviously it's for a bigger mission, but it's walking away from something that was your baby for so long, that impacts thousands, and now that it's virtual, like hundreds of thousands of people around the world on an annual basis. What did that look like as you were walking through those decisions?
I was just clear when I built Thrive, and I'm real clear now that it's a mechanism, it's the vehicle, it's not the destination. Thrive for me wasn't my end all be all, where I'd always dreamed of running a big event and building this community. Yeah. As my life was progressing, and were the results of the decisions and the habits that we have, as I got to this place where I realized, man, I've stumbled across a beautiful business model that is super unique, that every single person I talk to wants it. I'm just going to throw a conference and see what happens to teach this business model. And on the very first Thrive, 450 people showed up, which was exciting. And then it went to 600, and then it went to 1,000, and then it went to 2,000, and you've seen it. But so I knew that my end goal is what I just described to you. It's freedom. And along the way, there are different mechanisms that will serve me, some longer than others, but it's all mission-based. I'm on a mission to change as many lives as I can, and to be the dad that I described, and the husband that I didn't much describe, but love my wife too. I think I got so distracted with my kids. Want to be a fully present husband as well. And so I'm so clear on the destination of where I want to go that it's unemotional for me to make decisions like shutting down Thrive, if that makes sense. It is, for some people, their goal. And I get so much confusion on why I would shut down something that makes me millions of dollars a year net, and that is so positive and so powerful, and something that the world really needs. Mm-hmm. A lot of people aspire to run big conferences and to run mastermind groups and to have courses and to be in the education space and to change lives, and they see that I've been able to create a really beautiful thing, and we've had the best speakers in the world on our stage, right? You know that. And so it worked, and we're shutting it down. And the reason is because it has done everything it can for me, for the mission I'm on. Yeah. And even though it looks like I'm stepping out of the public sphere to work on my personal finances, which on the surface is true, I will be better equipped to live my God-given mission once I do this than I am currently. And if I do bring Thrive back someday, it will be 10 times better than it ever could have been if I didn't shut it down. The best way I can describe it is me and my wife. My wife and I, we dated for 2 years, then she dumped me. We took 10 months apart, and then I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. The reason Sonia, my wife, dumped me after those 2 years was I just wasn't ready to be a husband. And she's like, hey, we've been dating for 2 years. You don't need to propose yet, but are you at least even open-minded to someday getting married? And because of my losses and things that I'd gone through, I told her, I didn't cover that on this podcast, but on the last one we did, where I lost friends in my car accident. And, I was in a bad spot when I met my wife emotionally. And so I was willing to be monogamous, but I wasn't willing to get married. I was still broken from the people that I had loved and lost before meeting my wife. And so 2 years into that relationship, she asks me straight up, Cole, are we ever going to get married? Would you ever marry anybody, even if it's not me? And I told her no, because I was convinced that everyone I loved would die because of, again, stuff that I've now worked through. And as she had that conversation with me, and I had to be honest with her and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to marry you, she dumped me. Well, then I moved to Mexico, became a missionary, because that's what everybody does when your girlfriend dumps you. You move to Mexico and become a missionary. And those 10 months I lived in Mexico serving those people, I got the healing I needed in the hang-ups I had of why I told her I wasn't ready to get married. And I knew that I loved her, but bro, I was just scared. I was just afraid of falling in love, getting married, having a family, and losing my family someday, because it was still so fresh and raw from the loss that I'd gone through. And again, a lot of therapy and a lot of years and a lot of tears later, I'm totally fine and obviously married. But those 10 months, I had to have that space away. If I had forced myself through and married Sonia, we probably would have ended up in divorce. Same couple, same man and woman, but that space that I had down in Mexico changed everything for me. It was a complete reset. It changed everything, bro. I had been in business for 4 years at that point. Best I'd ever done was made $500,000 a year. Went home, was a multimillionaire within 20 months. Like, it changed everything for me. The freedom and the clarity and the refresh and the rest that I got being in Mexico changed my whole life. Came back to America, asked her to marry me. Didn't ask her to be my girlfriend again. Remember, she had dumped me. I just straight up said, hey, we have already dated for 2 years. I didn't even know if she had a boyfriend, to be completely honest. But I set up this beautiful thing and asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And then we got married 4 months later and got pregnant a month after our wedding. So I went from single dude in Mexico to married with a kid in an 11-month window. It's kind of cool. When I reflect back on that conversation that she had where she dumped me in that 10 months I had, that's the best analogy I can give you for Thrive specifically. Yeah. I know that Thrive can never be what it could be if I just push through and never stop. This break of me shutting it down and walking away from it, whatever the future is for me that I do, whether it's Thrive or something totally different, or if I never come back into the education space at all, whatever the next thing is for me, it will be more mission driven. I will impact more lives, and I will be more in alignment with my God-given mission because of the break I'm taking right now. Mm-hmm. So it's a very long-winded, thorough example for your audience with the relationship example, but maybe some of your listeners right now can relate to that. Maybe they're in a relationship where at one point they broke up, or at least can imagine what I'm talking about, where my wife and I needed that space for me to kind of go from being a boy to being a man, to then come back ready for her to then have the marriage that we now have. Thrive, and whatever I do next is the same thing. Got to shut it down, got to kill it, and then got to rebirth it.
So that actually makes a ton of sense to me. And I think it really comes back to, like, I don't know, we could use the words clarity building, but like getting clear on what actually matters. Yeah. And what's cool to see is that you're, in theory, when you're really clear on what actually matters, we should be able to abstract emotion out of it. Unfortunately, that's really difficult at times. Yeah. But like, it makes sense. It's almost like giving up the good to get the great. That's exactly it. You said it in 4 words, what took me 4 minutes. So thank you for economizing my thoughts. No, 100%. And dude, it's so important in any area of life. Like, what do we really want? What is it going to take to get there? And then relentlessly pursue it, right? And then obviously the rest as well in that process. Like, no more toxic hustle mindset around here for those of you who've fallen into it, like all of us have. Dude, and I kind of want to rip on that, yeah, if we can, just to expand more on what I was talking about. There's a season.
where you've got to sacrifice everything if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. So don't get it twisted. In my early 20s and early 30s and mid 30s, I grinded my face off. And in a lot of places in a really unhealthy way. But I think because I've had near-death experiences, and I think because I have just awesome parents and really great friendships like with you, and just awesome mentors have been just pouring into me, that I got a little bit of wisdom a little earlier than most, and realized that if I made a life out of the habits that I was creating around my business, that I would end up divorced, or at least in a relationship that wouldn't be on fire. I would have kids that would love me, but I wouldn't have the relationship with them that I'm developing with mine currently. Like, I realized that everything would be in black and white, and I want to live in high definition, vivid color, right? And so you've got to hustle, you've got to grind, but you've got to rest, and you've got to have priorities outside of your business. I feel like the hustle culture, I won't list names, but your audience has heard all of them say, like, you can't even take a day off because your competition's going to come up on you. Like, you know, I see them in their Instagram stories, these influencers out there. It'll be like a Sunday, and they'll be, you know, at home working, and they'll be like, everyone's watching football right now, and I'm sitting here on my computer, and I'm like, dude, you shouldn't be watching football or on your computer. You should be in the ocean with your family, right? Or you should be creating art, or doing, like, you should be living your life. I think that sitting and vegging out and just watching TV all day is equally as tragic as just working all day. You're supposed to be alive. Like, God gave us a beautiful planet, and there's like all kinds of interesting human beings and animals that populate this place. And so many people get so in the grind of working their asses off that they just want escapism. So when they're done working their asses off, that's why they just sit around vegging out watching TV. And when you look at how they spend the 168 hours we get in a week, it was either grinding their face off in an unhealthy way, or it was escapism where they're smoking weed or doing drugs or drinking too much, or just vegging out on sports or video games because they work so hard. That's their excuse. I need my video game. But when did you ever get around to living that life? And for me, you know, I'm not here to judge people's priorities, but if your life is just work and video games, then damn, that sucks that you're willing to settle, not me. I want passion, I want romance, I want travel, I want adventure, I want fear, I want to be afraid of things, right? I don't want to just live in a bubble of grind, hustle, and video games or sports or whatever it is. And so I just wish there was more people telling that story, that, like, for me, I became a multi-millionaire so that I could live my life, do what I want, when I want, with who I want, how I want, for as long as I want, and I don't have to ask a freaking person for permission. I don't need to ask my accountant if I've got the money to do so. If you ask me right now, bro, let's go to Paris tomorrow, bring the family, and we're taking a private jet, I'd say, what airport and what's my cut? I'll wire you the money in the morning. And that's what I think life is all about. And I think a lot of people, there's honor in hustle, I should say in work ethic, but I just would caution people to not make a habit out of sacrificing all of your relationships and all of your life experiences for your business. It's not worth it. I'm going to share this weekend, so you'll see the slide and know what I'm talking about. But when you look at the top regrets from senior citizens, you can Google it. I did this for my talk tomorrow that you're going to see. And there were all types of responses. I went to like 15 different websites to gather the top 5 reasons why people, what regrets they had when they're like 95 years old. And what's really fascinating, Mike, is in every single survey it said, I wish I didn't work as much. There was stuff like, I wish I would have asked for forgiveness, or I wish I would have forgiven. Like, there was a bunch of variables, but the one common denominator, you're going to see this tomorrow, is in every single survey, one of the top 5 answers was, I wish I worked less while I could. And for me, I don't need to be 95. I want to be 38 and be like, okay, well then I'm not going to work as much, and I'm going to make my family a priority.
Yeah. Dude, and I was telling you this before we press record, like that, this is one of the most interesting and most important topics, I think, in this entire sphere of entrepreneurship, right? Because a distinction that I've been making, and I actually didn't click until you were just sharing that, but a distinction I've been making is like discipline versus like toxic hustle.
Yes.
And I think that, because, dude, I fell into that, and that led to my spiral with panic attacks and anxiety, and like when I was like freaking 23 and had everything that I wanted in life. But because I fell into that so heavily and I didn't know how to manage it, I fell off the deep end.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the season idea. Like I'm in a season right now where our business growth, like I'm making sacrifices, but I still have plenty of time with my wife. I don't have kids yet, so I can afford it. And I understand that that's the season I'm in.
Yeah.
But I do it because I look at what season I want to be in down the line, and I don't want to have to make the same sacrifices then, because there's going to be a lot more variables.
Right.
This is on my heart to share.
But what you said earlier, though, is like gold. You have a really good job. You do a good job of summarizing what I say in few words. But say it again. You said discipline versus hustle.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
And discipline is honorable. I think that you need to be disciplined in your work ethic, but you need to be disciplined in your family ethic.
Completely agree.
You need to be disciplined in your personal life ethic of taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that the discipline that everyone understands is required to succeed in business, that same level of discipline, that same level of grit should be applied to more areas of life. That's all I wanted to say.
I completely agree. One of what I was going to share is, and it works perfectly with that, is I got really clear early on that one of my biggest fears was missing out on the big things because I was focused on the little things that I thought were the big things. And I was listening to just like one of Lewis Howe's podcasts or something.
Yeah.
Way long ago. I remember I was on the freaking 6 train in New York City, packed in like a sardine, and it clicked. And I must have been like 24, like single, living in Manhattan, nowhere near what I wanted in life. But I got really clear on that. And you do it, I think, better than most. And I mentioned before, like, this is one of the reasons that I stay in these communities, because when I first joined Connect, I was like 3 weeks out of corporate. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Yeah, no. I think you were still at corporate, bro.
I was 3 weeks out.
Okay.
Because you know what it was? I left corporate. I set a target. I was working with Yaya. I set a target. I'm like, if I close this many clients and enroll this many clients by a certain date, I would give myself permission to get a VIP ticket to Thrive. I had no freaking clue who you were at the time. No
That's
disrespect.
cool.
But
Yeah.
I was like Ed Milet and all these other people. I'm like, that's really cool. And Make Money Matter sounded really cool. So I ended up there. But when I joined, everyone's immediate answer who doesn't understand these spaces and they see the investments that we make in ourselves and our network, and they're like, what did you get out of it? Like, did you grow your business? And my business was non-existent at the time. Like, I cut my runway in half to join here. But my answer to them was always like, you can't calculate that ROI, because it wasn't necessarily about building the business to me. Like, I knew that would come eventually, and it has, and that's great. But I stayed in it because I was getting to surround myself with people like you, people like Danny, people like a lot of our friends that were in different stages of life than me and doing it the way I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Right? So the example I always gave, and I want to give you some props, is like, I would share with my friends like how you support Sonia when she was on stage at Big Thrive, and how you literally sit in front on the floor every single time. Yeah. Right? I would talk about how you parent your kids, and the same with all of our other friends that are in these stages. And that was what was so cool to me. It was like, dude, the businesses, they'll build themselves. Like, not themselves, but you get what I mean. Like, that will happen. But I want to make sure that I'm growing into that version of me that can do whatever that looks like for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not missing out on the big things. When did you, obviously your parents set a really good example. Yeah. When did that click for you? Was it the time in Mexico, or how did that come so clear for you? And then from there, how have you stayed the course so well over the last decade plus? Yeah, it came clear to me in my 20s, and never been asked that question. Good job. You got me a little emotional thinking about wifey on stage. It became clear to me in my 20s through a combination of things. Number one, what you've already mentioned, my parents setting that example and me being like, dude, I have so many friends. So I went through the ages of when friends get divorces. Like, all my friends, by the time I graduated high school, most every friend I had's parents had been divorced in my childhood, if that makes sense. Like, I was last man standing. And so seeing what divorce does to families, and seeing
what my home life was like, I just knew that was going to be a priority. So that was ingrained from childhood, right? Another one was my accidents. The fact that I had near-death experiences really makes you have to reprioritize things quickly. Like if you right now had a weird pain, went to the doctor and they said that you've got 3 months to live out of nowhere, how different would the next 3 months look than the last 3 months? And I should be dead. I was on an operating table in an emergency room with an ER surgeon working on me, who once I came to in the hospital days later, he sat down and kneeled next to me with tears coming down his eyes, and because my friends had passed away, and he said that I shouldn't have survived. He literally looked me in the face, and his exact words were, "I can't medically explain how you survived." And he pointed up and he said, "Someone up there must have a plan for you." And I'll never forget it. So I came that close to death. Because there'll be, someone will run a red light and you'll be like, "I almost died today. Someone ran a red light." But I should have been dead, right? I got lifted in a freaking helicopter to the hospital. So the near-death experience and the childhood were two things that God gave me, right? Life happens for you, not to you. Two things that God gave me that made me clear. But then the third one that came to mind was my international experiences. I did become a missionary and moved to Mexico for those 10 months, but prior to that, I had taken missions trips with my church and friends countless times, probably 25 times for my teens and 20s. Quick trips like for over the weekend down to Mexico, but dude, I went to Africa for 6 weeks. I went to Russia for 6 weeks. I went to Southeast Asia for 9 weeks. I went to South America 3 times for 2 weeks. All of those were missions trips, and seeing what real poverty looks like and being around things that we in America, no, I should say in developed nations, because Canada is the same and so is the UK and so many other places. You get insulated in such a bubble that you don't even know what the actual real world looks like. We assume we know what the real world looks like because we're all around entrepreneurs who are all making millions of dollars, and we come to fancy hotels with ocean views like this, and you sit in first class on your airplane where everyone else is like, we're so insulated that you just assume that this is what life looks like. It's not until you get out there that you realize, oh my gosh, all of America is in a bubble. Like the poorest people in America are living better than the wealthiest people in some of these African nations I went to. I even say I went to Africa too. I went to Africa for 6 weeks as well. And so that international travel made me, realize the big things and what those things really are and what really matters in life. And so that's what gave me my purpose and my mission of wanting to give back. And so I would say the parenting, the almost death, and then my travels of not traveling to Paris, France, where I stay in some bougie penthouse with a Eiffel Tower view. Those travels are cool too. I'm talking traveling to Kabunga, Africa, in the middle of the jungle, where I was the first Caucasian person that some of the tribes had even seen in their entire lives. They'd never seen a white person before, and getting down in the dirt with them and realizing that we both worship the same God. Like, it's so crazy to have nothing in common with someone other than a religious belief, which is identical, and to someone I've never met before, but to be able to talk about Bible scripture and things like that was so cool. And that human connection really instilled my core values. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who's listening to this who feels lost, man, I would recommend that you travel abroad and that you give back. I've served so many people, but I have received the greatest gift, and that sounds so cliche. Yeah. But I mean, here I am talking about the gift I was given of my priorities, and so much of that is because of the people I quote unquote helped along the way, who are probably helping me more than someone else. And so that's what came to mind when you asked.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think that it's so funny. It is cliche, and it's one of those things that probably just seems cliche until you experience it. Yeah. And but it's so true. And we'll, before we wrap up, we'll talk about kind of what that shape has taken for you guys, especially through some of these last pivots and what you've done with this for-purpose idea. One thing I'm really curious about is through the transition in the seasons, right? We were talking about kind of this toxic hustle, but really like the seasons when you actually have to like work your face off. And when you did that from like a family perspective, right? You said there was 20 months and you became a multimillionaire after coming back from Mexico. Mm-hmm. Really quickly also now had a wife, and very shortly thereafter a kid. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that injected a lot of gasoline on top of the fire as well, from a purpose perspective. But like when we talk about missing the big things because we're focused on the little things and we thought they were the big things, how did you transition from that season of like, I'm working my face off to, okay, my priorities are shifting? Because, and to add context to the question for people listening, I feel like it's a crutch a lot of people in the business world use. They say, oh, I'm doing it for this, but then they sacrifice the this for doing
I'm doing it for my family, but my family never sees me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how have you navigated that as you've gone from season to season, and obviously as your family has grown and your businesses have grown astronomically as well?
Audits, bro. It's so easy to get caught with projects, and I'm going to say there's a muscle you can develop. I have a sensitivity towards when I feel like I'm making my family sacrifice too much. To be completely transparent, this weekend's one of those weekends. This is a weekend where I'm out of alignment. My wife's sick, my 4-month-old is sick, my 10-year-old is sick. Only me and the 6-year-old are like rock stars. And when I leave to come to events like this, wifey's got all the kids alone. Well, now wifey's got all the kids alone, and she's sick, and 2 of the 3 kids are sick, and it's a lot for her. And so I came down as late as I possibly could, and I'm going to go back as early as I can. But this weekend is a weekend where I wish I could be home to be with her, and I can't because I'm here. So I guess what I'm trying to articulate is you never have it perfect, but it's ebb and tide. So now I've just canceled everything on Tuesday. I can't cancel everything on Monday because I have appointments that are people flying in from other states, so I've got to do them Monday. But Tuesday's now been cleared. I'm going to pull my kids out of school and we're going to have a family day. They don't know it yet, but I made that decision driving down today because I felt a little bit guilty. So there's a muscle that you develop once you have priorities straight. The other thing that I've done, bro, and I'm going to teach this, and I've talked to you about this before, are my absolute truths. I create boundaries around what I will or won't do so that I'm protecting my quality of life. And these aren't core values. It's different than core values. These are my absolute truths that every opportunity must check every single box. Not some. It has to check every single box or I won't do it. One example of an absolute truth is it has to make my children proud. I had an opportunity to invest in an app on a cell phone which would show you where other members of the app are so that you could hook up with them. It was not Tinder or any of those things, but it was specifically to just have random hookups with people, right? And with how broken society it is, it probably would have gone on to be a massive success and I could have made a bunch of money. Let's just say I made $10 million from that. And my little girls, my 2 beautiful daughters were like, Daddy, where did all your money come from? How am I going to tell them that it's an app where people are just boning each other, right? Like, yeah. So one thing is a core value of mine, or excuse me, not a core value, an absolute truth of mine is core value is different. That's an acronym, PRIDE, and I can go through that too. PRIDE is my core values. But my absolute truths are, the first is it has to make my children proud. I will never earn $1 that I couldn't explain it inside and out to my children and have them be proud of Daddy. Yeah. Not just tolerating Daddy, but be proud. They're proud of my real estate business. They're proud of my restaurants. They're proud of Thrive. They're proud of what I'm doing. Another absolute truth is my wife has to be able to do it if she wants to. So if you came to me, Cole, and said, dude, I have the best opportunity in the world, and I was like, cool, I want my wife to do something with us, and you're like, absolutely not, it can only be the 2 of us, I would turn you down. I want to work with my wife, right? And so what these absolute truths, just for context, let me give you one more. Another absolute truth is autonomy. If you told me, Cole, I will pay you $10 million a year to come and work for me, but you have to move to downtown Manhattan and you have to live here and you have to be at a desk 40 hours a week, I would tell you no. I don't need your $10 million a year if it's going to require me to give up my autonomy. So you can see these aren't core values. These are absolute truths. And I have 11 of them. And these 11 absolute truths, before I say yes to anything or make a decision to do anything, I go through my absolute truths. And if it checks the boxes, yep, I can make my kids proud with this. Yep, it's completely autonomous. Yep, my wife can participate if she chooses to. And the other 11, yep. Then I do it, and it keeps me in the alignment that you're asking about. And I think most people don't even understand the concept around absolute truths. They're just focused on money, and they just do one simple equation. How much time and effort is this going to cost me? And how much money do I have the opportunity to make? And if the money is big enough for the cost, people do it. And that's like their only metric. You bring an opportunity to someone, whether they're a career professional and it's a job, or whether they're an entrepreneur and self-employed, whatever it is, you bring an opportunity to someone and the only metric is, how much of a pain in the ass is this going to be, and how much money is it going to make me, that's a terrible metric. No wonder so many people are upset, because a lot of people will lease their lives, which is what to just be pretty blunt, for people who have jobs, you're leasing your life for your salary. Whatever that salary was, you were willing to say, boss, I will give you 40 hours of my week, if you're lucky, 40 hours, used for a lot of people, it's 50, 60 and beyond. I'll give you 40 hours of my life. Non-refundable minutes, as Bobby Castro says. Yep. 40 hours a week of my life for this 200 grand a year, whatever it is. That's bonkers to me that that's the only metric people have. So for me, I have 11 metrics, and that keeps me in alignment. And so for anybody who's listening to this, it's like, dude, Cole, I need absolute truths. Spend some time discovering what your non-negotiables are. If, for me, like the autonomy and the make the kids proud, those are non-negotiables. I would never, even if it checks all the boxes, but my children would be embarrassed about it. Like I go and take pictures of my butthole on OnlyFans or something like that, right? Well, that's autonomous, and my wife could hold the camera and like it would check the boxes, but I don't think baby girl would be proud of daddy spreading out on some website. So it's got to check 11 out of the 11 boxes, and by doing so, I stay happy and I stay in my alignment.
So good. That'll be the part where people need to kind of go back and listen to it again and really build them for themselves, right? Like I'm hearing you answer this, and I'm like, okay. Because really the part I'm curious about is like, I'm trying to approach building my business with like beginning with the end in mind, right? Like starting with the life I want to be living and making sure I'm building the business to account for that. And understanding that like, okay, the seasons piece and like all these different things, but like I want to build the thing that produces the cash that I can then make sure that it doesn't engulf everything else. And I've built the thing producing the cash, but all of a sudden I can't get away from it the way that I want to. And I think having those, I want to say like core tenets, but like these absolute truths, it allows you to build those guidelines.
Yes.
Properly.
Yeah, 100%. And they're a safety mechanism, bro. I can't explain it. Like, I don't want to overcomplicate this. It's just, I know that my 11 absolute truths give me the quality of life that I want, and that I could compromise that value set for money, but then I would be unhappy. Yeah. And praise God, I've got enough money now that I don't need to do things for the money anymore. It's always about the experience. Randy was sharing with you something that he and I are going to build together. I think he's going to be on one of your episodes here. I don't need that money. I'm fine with my businesses, my restaurants, my whatever. I'm fine. Yeah. But it's going to be an exciting journey because it's the next chapter in this life that I get to live. And so anyway, I would encourage everybody to stop just asking yourself how much of a pain in the ass is this going to be, and how much money is it going to pay me, and if there's enough money, you just do it. Create absolute truths. You need core values too. My family has core values, but you need absolute truths to just make sure that you stay safe. So good. Dude, before we jump out of here, tell everybody what you're doing with the Make Money Matter Foundation. And a lot of those cool initiatives. Obviously, like, you got a lot of cool people working with you on that. You finally took the orphanage that you've just been kind of like funding on your own. Yeah. And like now you're scaling the impact. Yeah. I think it's super cool. Tell people what you're doing. So when I lived in Mexico, I helped start an orphanage. This was back in 2011, and self-funded it all the way until 2021. It was my little private thing, and I am a Christian, and the Bible says to give with your right hand without the left hand knowing. So basically, be a generous person, but don't boast about it and be a dickhead, Don't be like, look at how generous I am. So I kind of kept my orphanage a secret because I did it because it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I wanted selfishly the credit. I wanted to get to heaven and not have God be like, all you did was brag about your orphanage, so no good. Like, I wanted it to matter. And my inner circle would hear about it, and it would come out every now and then because I'm passionate about that. But it was my buddy Danny who sat me down and said, bro, you need to make this an actual 501c3 nonprofit organization, and let's develop this thing and let's raise a bunch of money. And I was like, no. And he's like, how good does it make you feel to fund Christmas? I was like, so good. He's like, how good does it make you feel to pay for all their medical bills, all their food, all their meals, all their salaries, because we have staff that works at the orphanage and all that. I was like, dude, it's the best feeling in the world. And he's like, then why are you keeping that just to yourself? Why wouldn't you want to share that with other people? And I was like, dang, Danny. All right, screw it, let's do it. So Thrive's tagline was Make Money Matter. And so we actually started a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Make Money Matter Inc. You can find it at makemoneymatter.org. And it's right now focusing on developing my orphanage. We just built a medical clinic on my orphanage to serve the community because it's a really remote part of Mexico in a really rural area where it's 45 minutes to get to the closest hospital if you even have a car. Like, these are very, very poor people in the colonias. They don't have cars. And so we bring the medical professionals to them now with the medical facility that we built. We've raised all the money and are purchasing now 4 acres. I became a resident of Mexico in order to do so. We're buying 4 acres where we're going to build an entire village down there. And we've raised half the money for the village. And so we're going to be able to take care of about 100 kids. Right now we can take care of 25, maybe 30. We'll be able to take care of about 100 kids and 60 women. We have a kind of cool program that they run down there where it's a women's recovery program for any women who are addicts. They can come to our program. It's completely free. They get to live there. And the ones that are moms who we're looking for specifically, those kids get to go be foster kids at the orphanage. So we have actual orphans at the orphanage, but then foster kids whose mom is just on the other side of the wall at the rehab facility as well. So we'll be able to take care of 60 women and 100 children once this project's done. And it's the first of many projects. We want to have one massive undertaking each year. So right now, this expansion of these 4 acres in this city we're building is what we're focusing on this year. Next year, we'll move on to a new project in a new part of the world. And so what Make Money Matter is a easy way for people to make their money matter. For people, and Danny and I completely fund the whole initiative. So all of people's donations go towards the kids in Mexico.
So cool.
Yeah.
Shout out to Danny for guilting you.
That. Exactly.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And people can support directly on that website, I assume?
Yeah, if anybody wants to, you can just go to makemoneymatter.org and support there. By all means, don't feel pressured. But if anybody wants to.
Do. I mean, it's going to a good cause, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, 100% of it goes to the kids. So
that's awesome.
But so yeah, that's it, dude. And this is what I want to do. I want my kids to grow up without limitations. I want them to see what life looks like when money isn't even an object and all you do is play and manage investments and give back at orphanages. And I mean, dude, we want to work a lot with human trafficking prevention. Mm-hmm. And so that's our next initiative is there's plenty of people that are working around human traffic victims. How do we prevent those victims from being victimized? How do we keep those women and children safe before they're stolen off the street and sold into slavery? And so that's really the direction our nonprofit's going to go.
I love that. I mean, our for-purpose partners are in that space as well.
Cool. With
Larry and whatnot. And
yep, exactly.
I think that's so cool. So guys, it's linked in the show notes. Get connected, show some love, all that stuff. Cole, last question for you. I asked you this in the first one, so I'm going to ask it with a little different twist. Let's focus on these last 5 years or so. Last 5 years worth of pivots and business growth and family growth and all these things. Through that entire window, what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact on your life and your business? That
was a lot. So in the last 3 to 5 years, what?
Biggest lesson.
Biggest lesson I've learned that's had the biggest impact and biggest thing. And I got to do a different answer than I did last time, right?
Who knows? I don't even remember what you said.
I'm just trying to remember what it was in the last 3 to 5 years. It's been my biggest lesson. I would say
like 35 years of a window the last time.
Yeah, exactly. I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned recently, with the right people, not necessarily partnership, but collaboration gets you there faster. Right now, you and I are collaborating. Mm-hmm. I'm sharing ideas and you're sharing your audience. There are now people that are going to know I exist and I'm sharing my expertise with you for free, right? So like this is a collaboration. Man, I wish I would have collaborated sooner and bigger. Not partnerships, that's a whole nother conversation for the next time you invite me on your show so I can crap all over people's partnerships, because I think when people open companies and split them 50-50, that almost always they do it out of fear and it's the wrong move to make. Mm-hmm. But collaborative effort of us combining resources to make this podcast is a very simple example. I would say that the biggest thing that's changed my life are the collaborations I've made and the tens of millions of dollars that those collaborations have brought in and the thousands of lives that have been impacted because of it. And I just wish I would have been more collaborative sooner.
Love it. I should ask you before, where can people find you on social?
Just Cole Hatter, yeah. One word on every social platform. It's just Cole Hatter.
Boom. Cole, thanks for joining me, brother.
Thanks for having me, bro.
100%.